And good evening once again from our NBC News headquarters here in New York. Day 337 of the Trump administration, and the president's Christmas vacation already underway at Mar-a-Lago and West Palm, where he successfully beat the traffic today. He's coming off a big legislative win, heading into his second year in office with midterm elections ahead. But the Russia investigation, that traveled with him on vacation. We are now learning that investigators are now themselves focusing on some of the people closest to Donald Trump. Today, his personal assistant, and this is going back decades, Rona Graff, was questioned by staff from the House Intelligence Committee in an undisclosed location here in New York, not Washington. This is a move Democrats on the panel have objected to. They feel it should have been done in Washington. Mike Memley is the NBC News journalist who broke the news about Rona Graff's questioning, and he spoke with our own Nicole Wallace earlier today.
Anybody who has spoken with Trump, has met with Trump, has called Trump, has gone through her. And I think we know one of the subjects that they were certainly going to bring up. Don Jr. testified before the committee on December 6th. We know that Rob Goldstone, the publicist who arranged that infamous Trump Tower meeting, in the emails between him and Don Jr. setting that up, there was a reference to Rona, because if he wanted to get the incriminating information about Hillary Clinton to Donald Trump, it was through Rona. So that had to be one of the areas they focused on today.
Also, we are learning new details about the House Intelligence Committee's interview with the now embattled FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, who worked directly under James Comey for a time. Wednesday, McCabe spent nearly 8 hours with the Intel Committee, and the very same Mike Memley of NBC News reports that, quote, a source familiar with McCabe's testimony before the committee told NBC News that McCabe confirmed that then FBI Director James Comey told him that Trump had asked for a loyalty pledge from him. For those who need it, here's a reminder of what Comey said about that during his testimony. This is back before the Senate Intelligence Panel this past June.
He asked specifically of loyalty in the context of asking me to stay. My common sense told me what's going on here is he's looking to get something in exchange for granting my request to stay in the job.
And a new report out today indicates House intelligence may soon question two other key Trump associates. Bloomberg News is saying this, quote, President Trump's former chief strategist Steve Bannon and his former campaign manager Corey Lewandowski have been asked to testify to House lawmakers investigating Russian interference in the 2016 election. Both men were sent letters this week by the House Intelligence Committee asking them to testify in early January, according to an official familiar with the panel's schedule. Bloomberg goes on to add they have not yet responded to the House committee, but that the invitation was not in the form of a subpoena to testify. Rather, it was for a voluntary interview. There's also news, as we mentioned at the top of the broadcast, about Jared Kushner. President's son-in-law is also a White House senior advisor. The New York Times is telling it this way, quote, federal prosecutors in Brooklyn have sought bank records about entities associated with the family company of Jared Kushner, President Trump's son-in-law and senior advisor, according to 4 people briefed on the matter. There's no indication this subpoena is related to the Mueller investigation, but we're going to talk about that timing in just a moment, also the locale. So with that, let us turn to our leadoff panel on a Friday night before Christmas. Robert Costa, national political reporter for The Washington Post, moderator of Washington Week on PBS, and an MSNBC political analyst. In short, a very busy man. Matthew Nussbaum, White House reporter for Politico, and Nick Ackerman's here with us, who was a Watergate special prosecutor. Welcome to you all. I think, Robert, I would like to begin with Rona. Underscore what we've already established, what you already heard about her importance, her role in the orbit of all things Donald Trump.
She's a crucial person, Brian. I've known Rona Graff for years as a reporter going up to Trump Tower. She was and has been for decades the gatekeeper for Donald Trump. And that 26th floor, she sits right outside of his office. She is so close with him personally as a friend, not so much an advisor politically, but as a confidant and totally trusted by the president and then candidate and businessman Trump.
So the flip side of that is if you're an aggressive prosecutor, I mean, you're looking to hear who overheard what. Were you on Air Force One? Were you, obviously she wasn't, but she could have been present at the creation of many a conversation.
Not only was she probably present at many conversations, but President Trump does not use email. And he relied upon Rona Graff for years to keep a record of emails that were coming in, letters that were coming in. She was what John Kelly now is inside of the White House, the person who controls the paper flow, the person who controls the door. So documents matter as much as her recollections.
Nick, when someone is unable to travel to Washington, I guess it's not unheard of that investigators would come to you and ask the questions they want to ask wherever you happen to live. It strikes a lot of us as unusual that this was, in effect, a field investigation, a field hearing, field questioning of Rona Graff in New York. Why? Why was that courtesy extended and not to other witnesses?
I don't think we really know the answer to that, but I don't really think it makes a difference. Because what we're looking at here is, if we start right from the basic premise, there was a crime committed. The crime was the hacking into the Democratic National Committee to steal emails. The only question here is whether or not anybody in the Trump campaign conspired with the Russians to release those emails. Rona Graff is a key witness in this whole thing. I don't care where they interview her. They could interview her on the moon, as far as I'm concerned. She has key information based on that email that was sent on June 3rd by Ron Goldstone, who offered to provide information that would incriminate Hillary Clinton to Rona to give to Donald Trump. But Ron Goldstone said, maybe it's better I bring it in person. It's pretty obvious to me that we know back in April of 2016 that the Trump campaign knew that there were these stolen emails from the DNC. And it's also pretty obvious that one could assume that what was being transported to the Trump campaign at that point in time were these stolen emails, and that the person who would have received that, or who Ron Goldstone offered to provide them to, was Rona. So she would be number one on my list. I don't care where she is. I'd be ready to talk to her. Now,
just a point of personal privilege here. Does it ever strike you the irony that you just mentioned a break-in at the Democratic National Committee? You're talking about electronic, but a break-in nonetheless.
That's right. This is a high-tech break-in, just like happened in June of 1972, in May of 1972.
Unbelievable.
It is the exact same thing, except in this situation, they were able to take lots more documents. Nobody was there to check the tape on the door or catch any of the burglars. And it wasn't until after the fact that we actually learned that the burglars were Russian and that there was a plot to take those emails and use them to throw the election to Donald Trump.
Well put. Matthew, about Mr. Comey. Comey's name is back in this because of Mr. McCabe, the former number 2 at FBI. In many areas of law, it matters after something happens to you that you come home and mention it to friend or family contemporaneously, right in the moment. And I guess the Comey corroboration is the headline from McCabe's hours and hours of testimony, correct?
I think that's right. Not that many of us doubted Mr. Comey to begin with his memos written contemporaneously, but to have Andrew McCabe backing that up. And that instance of Trump asking for loyalty is so in character. We now know from the Washington Post reporting that he had concerns about Gorsuch not being loyal enough. We know Donald Trump values loyalty above all else. But I'd keep in mind the messenger here, Andrew McCabe. He's become something of a punching bag for Republicans, especially Republicans in the House who are trying to sort of muddy the waters, allege bias over at the FBI. They've really taken aim at McCabe, and I've tried to sort of make him a toxic figure, which I'm not sure if that will impact sort of the import of him corroborating Mr. Comey's story.
And Mr. Costa, as is our role with you so often, first of all, if it was up to us, you'd be chained right here and you'd get rid of those other jobs for the Post and PBS. But what can investigators learn, remind us, from Messrs. Lewandowski and Bannon?
You have to remember there are many tracks right now. There are the congressional tracks, and what they're really trying to do is bring in the key figures and paint a broader picture of what happened inside of the campaign. Lewandowski was part of the initial recruitment of some of these foreign policy advisors. That's when Carter Page and other people like him come into the campaign circle. And Bannon, he has avoided scrutiny on a lot of this Russia probe so far, but he was the CEO of the Trump campaign in its closing months, a close associate of the candidate, and they're going to want to know on Capitol Hill, what did he know? But what's really more important is what does Robert Mueller want to know from all these figures, because the congressional investigations can only go so far. They help us learn more, but they don't come forward with indictments in the way that Mueller could.
And you agree with my iceberg theory of the Mueller investigation, that at any given time, no more than 5 or 10% of it is visible to folks like us?
I've staked out the Mueller investigation. I've seen the cars come right into that garage in Southwest Washington. We do not know what's happening with Mueller. That's why the congressional investigations are helpful, and they are in coordination at times with Mueller. They're not isolated. They're not islands. But we really can only follow the congressional investigations and when they talk to people like Rona Graff or try to call Bannon or Lewandowski.
Now, Nick, I do need the lawyer in you to explain a story we went through at the top of the broadcast. And again, for the Friday night before Christmas, I got a legal pad full of news here. Why would feds based in Brooklyn be snooping around Jared Kushner's finances?
Because there are lots of crimes to investigate here. And there are crimes that relate to what occurred here in New York City with respect to possibly 666 Fifth Avenue, a building that's owned by the Kushners that's underwater right now. There are lots of other deals that they've engaged in that relates to bringing in foreigners as investors into the Eastern District of New York and the Southern District of New York. I mean, I think there are lots of potential crimes to be investigated, and there's no reason why it's only going to be Mueller's investigative team. I mean, even during the Watergate case, there was a separate case that was tried against the former Attorney General Mitchell right here in the Southern District of New York.
So if you think wrongdoing was committed, it's to your advantage to spread or hope that other localities bring their own charges.
Oh, I think that's right. And I think Mueller's also relying on state authorities, too, as a backup in case there are pardons. I think that some of the crimes that are being investigated by the New York State Attorney General. Some of the criminal matters and the crimes involved are probably better than some of the federal crimes that are out there.
You see now, Matthew, you hear the counselor here put it that way. This is why so many people are perspiring. And I've heard it said that the kinetic atmosphere in the air of the West Wing changed so markedly, so appreciably when Flynn flipped, that was a big hike in the anxiety thermostat. And I am guessing the West Wing this president just vacated for 11 days away is just as filled with anxiety.
That's right. At this point, there's sort of a lot of whispering and waiting and wondering who's next. And I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens on New Year's Day when the president and the White House have predicted, this Mueller investigation will be over. He'll be exonerated by the new year. People in the White House, people outside the White House, legal observers know that that's not true. So when 2018 rolls around and Bob Mueller's still investigating and we have some trials coming up, it'll be really interesting to see how the president reacts to the prospect of having this investigation that so clouded year one of his presidency continue right on into year two.